Hey man, what's up?
Hey, what's up?
How you doing?
Good. How about you?
Pretty good. Uh, so, um, you disagree with this position?
Um, I agree with part of it, but I just don't think it'd be as large scale as we think the because I mean I've had a lot of experience in Europe. I've lived there. I've been there. Um, I've spent a lot of time and my life there, and I know that a lot of people like they get very easily hurt, especially in the EU. It's just like a bunch of children sometimes. But I don't feel that it could turn into a large scale conflict on the scale that you're kind of talking about in like a global sense, because it has the possibility. There's always that possibility that something like that could happen, but it just doesn't feel like that's where it's at currently. Like that doesn't feel where it's at the moment. Now that could change, obviously, but from talking about current perspective, it does not seem like something that would actually be happening right
Well,
now.
these are the. I mean, it doesn't seem like it, but it never does in the very early steps. And
Right. That's true.
something like that, where this kind of. I know it seems outlandish and it's kind of out of left field, but it's very similar to the years leading up to World War One, where a lot of countries began breaking away from each other, um, making this big complex web of alliances with everyone. They all started becoming isolationists and um, more or less setting up for like a powder keg event, like one thing happening and it's setting off everybody, and everybody just pairs off and takes sides. And when countries break away from larger groups like that and become isolationists, which America looks like it's going to do. England has done. France is now talking about doing the same thing. When that starts to happen, there's always a bigger chance for something to pop off like that.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. Yeah, there's always that there's history has shown that people tend to do that, but as we continue to go, there's a lot less um, possibility of of war between especially in Europe because of the interdependence upon one another that is inherent now in the system. There is no there is no way that especially landlocked European nations there is no way that they cannot coexist without the aid of each other. Germany used to be the bane of all of Europe, but now it's been a large backbone in the European Union, and
Right, but
there's always talk of leaving.
right, but if the European Union ceases to exist the way we know it, if all the biggest countries that are in it begin to break away from it, then um, it's not really nobody's really interdependent on anybody anymore. They're only dependent on themselves. And
Right. I mean, if they were to break away, theoretically that would be true. But because they rely on each other for different goods and for different things that certain countries can only produce and certain countries don't produce, the interdependence is still there because even mainly the dependence comes from the smaller nations that need larger nations to contribute as well. But even in some of the larger nations, a lot of the times, certain services, goods, things like that are not um, they don't produce them themselves, and so they need them. Just as we need states, the states need each other to a certain degree. To another degree, they don't at all.
mm-hmm.
They wouldn't need each other, but there is like an underlying interdependence that is still somewhat strong, and that could always deteriorate, like you were saying. That is possible. Anything is possible. That could definitely happen. It just it doesn't feel like that's the sentiment. And coming from a European and someone who has family in multiple European countries, I know that that is not the majority sentiment is to leave. Let's go. It's a lot of fury towards Britain currently, towards the UK, and even in the UK, I could see a potential issues there within the United Kingdom because Scotland wants independence now. They want to be part of the EU.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Ireland has been talking about becoming part of the EU. And I know for Europe, when someone does something that they find offensive, it tends to strengthen whoever else is on the other side. So England leaving is very, very much likely that they will try and strengthen their bond as opposed to
But
let's just leave it.
even in that vein, England does not want Scotland and Ireland to be a part of the EU if they're not.
I'm sorry.
I said in that vein, you and I both know that England doesn't want Scotland and Ireland to be a part of the EU if they're not.
Oh, of course.
So right there, that's the beginning of a conflict right there. If Scotland and
Right, but
Ireland
yeah.
on their own and England doesn't want them to, there's going to be friction. And England, who is, I mean, maybe next to us, their next biggest friend is France, correct?
Correct.
I would say nowadays. And France is talking about holding their own vote to leave. That's been discussed recently. I mean, I don't know if it's, as really possible as what happened with England, but if it did happen and England and France left together and then Scotland and Ireland want to go back and stay, that's a lot of friction. That's a lot of conflict.
No, yeah, absolutely. You're 100% correct.
It wouldn't take that much to have a big issue, especially with all the, what's already happening, just, completely separate from all this, just the terrorist attacks and everything else.
Right, and that's also a major point. I don't think they would risk war with one another when they already have so many issues with different areas of the world. You have Eastern Europe.
They do have major issues with that, but how hard would it be for a country like France if they broke away and sided with England? And how hard would it be if another attack took place and maybe a political leader gets killed or something major on that level? How hard would it be for France to say, well, we think, such and such a country had something to do with this, letting them get in because of, frayed relations. And it doesn't take much.
No, but I mean, without, right, you're trying to say that they would scapegoat another nation,
right,
and say, like, we're going to blame this on you. You allowed this to happen. This is your fault. That is a possibility. That is, but I know from personal experience that a lot of the times, like when attacks like this happen, it's so personal that if you know exactly who's done it, you're going to go after them immediately. When there was the attack here in the United States, for example, 9/11, there was no talk of let's invade this nation because, like, as in the talk of let's take out the nation because it's the nation's fault. No, we're going to go after exactly who did this. We're going to go after the group that orchestrated. And I know that, like,
that's exactly what they did, though. They did attack the country. That's
right, because they had to go through the country. But what I'm talking about is they would do the same in the Middle East. They would go to that country, but they're not going to try and piggyback off some other European nation because that causes friction in some other unnecessary venue that they don't need.
But all it takes is a country like Turkey, who was just attacked recently. Turkey, I don't believe Turkey's not in the EU, right?
No,
I don't think so. No, I didn't think so. So Turkey, who's bordering on countries who are part of the EU, Hungary and Croatia and all in that area in the Balkans.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say something happens in France and they say it has something to do with Turkey. Turkey's bordering those countries. They have good relations with those countries now. It's not like in the past where, Turkey and Austria, Hungary, and, all that area was just war torn all the time against one another. They're closer together now than they ever have been in history as far as governments. Mm-hmm. I think Turkey would be more aligned with the EU interests than with the separate, the countries who are trying to isolate themselves interests.
No, of course, but when you include terrorism into the equation here, Turkey would not try and just tell them no, we're going to align ourselves with the EU, because even then, like as of now, each nation can on their own attack whomever they wanted to. Realistically, if they wanted to invade some other country, they are fully capable of doing so, only to the extent of their own nation's military. Not right. The EU forces, not the UN forces, nothing like that.
Right.
because when the Paris attacks in France occurred, France immediately responded with a series of air raids against all known ISIS camps that they knew of in
Mhm.
Syria and certain other areas there. That wasn't an EU sanctioned, it wasn't UN sanctioned, it was France
Right.
sanctioned.
Right. But that's, see, to me, that's, I know it seems really terrible, and it is terrible if, if it happened the way that everybody says it happened, but that's a small scale event compared to what could happen at any time. And not to sound callous, but the countries don't act when regular citizens get injured. Countries act when major politicians or important government interests get injured. That's when um,
Right,
major.
catalysts of war. Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying that if even if we get to the point where France has a vote, even if they don't vote their way out of it's to me it looks eerily similar to the years leading up to World War One and the way the countries were acting towards each other, the diplomacy they have. It's just, I don't know.
Right, it is disconcerting. It
That
is. And I don't like to see England leave because that opens a whole new possibility of problems. But it also opens up a call to the attention within the EU of the necessary changes that need to be made. Because currently it is very bureaucratic. It is very difficult to get things done within Europe. Like with governments and sanctions and like what you
Yeah.
need to do, how you need to do it. And that is a major reason why Britain felt the need to leave, because they didn't feel the need. And that's a problem. And that's a problem that I hope will be fixed, because if it continues to be a problem, like you were saying, other countries may be disillusioned along the way as well and may feel the need to leave.
Right. And that to me is the biggest issue, because I don't see any of that bureaucracy ever getting cleared up, because it usually never goes that direction. It usually only gets more and more. It doesn't go the other way. So
Yeah, it is difficult. No, I agree.
it's not a good situation.
It's a very it's a teetering position on the edge of a cliff.
It's touchy.
We just both hope it teeters the right way.
Well, yeah, of course. And that's leaving out everything we've said is leaving out one big country that's a total wild card, and that's Russia.
Of course.
Russia is, nobody knows what Russia wants. They have nobody knows where they stand on any of these things, because they never really show themselves in that way. They who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, they're very secretive.
Russia could they could fall on anybody's side and could change a lot of
dynamics.
Yeah, a lot of the ways these countries are going to act.
Yeah, Russia's a gigantic wild card. You're very right in that. It's a very dangerous wild card as well, because whichever side it's on,
that side's going to feel the ability to push
empower.
They're going to feel the ability to push their demands. It's just like history always repeats itself. Whenever Russia gets involved, that's when things start to get out of hand. Because
Russia's very inflammatory.
Yeah, because that's when they look and they say, "Wait a minute, they've got more resources, more people, more just sheer area. They can, they hold a lot of sway."
Especially with its recent aggressive expansionist movement again.
Yeah. And with Syria, I mean, who knows? I've heard everything from their siding with us against Syria in the civil war that they're having, to they want us out of there completely so they could move in. To the theories are just nobody knows what they want, because they don't ever really show themselves. I mean, just a couple weeks back, I don't know if you pay any attention to this sort of thing, but the DEFCON system, they actually went to a level. I think it went to a level 3.
Yeah,
it moved,
3.
In the wrong direction one level for like a week, and then it moved back because there was all kinds of, big troop movements and naval movements and everything, towards borders and China.
Yeah, just like with the annex in the Ukraine,
Yeah.
Very similar situations, and that could be, if anything, that could be a major catalyst of war, if anything, I definitely see Russia being the tipping point or the spearhead of any sort of major conflict because of its inflammatory nature and its history of always
Yeah,
beginning wars and things like that.
and 90, in most throughout history, when Russia gets involved in something, France and England would get involved on the other side. But now, if France and England are split apart from the group that Russia's fighting, and they feel neglected or they feel slighted by that group, they're not going to get involved. Maybe
Yeah,
not that they would join the other side, but even if they just don't get involved, that could cause its own issues. It's just when countries start to leave like that, you start to see a vacuum of
instability. Yeah,
yeah, it just everything kind of can crumble really, not necessarily quickly, but you know, comparatively quickly.
yeah, relatively quickly if things can turn south.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, all right. So then we mostly agree, I'd say, for the most part.
Yeah, we were just trying to. All right, well, thank you. This
Yeah.
was it's fun.
All right, man. Have a good one.
All right, you too.
See ya.